Joining us now is senior editor of the Mises Institute, Ryan McMaken. Ryan, great to have you with us.
Hi, good morning. Great to be with you.
Give us your thoughts on governors like Hogan and Whitmer in Michigan and others that shut their states down, and now they don't understand why they don't have any money.
The thing about state and local governments is they can't print money. So when their tax revenues tank, there's not much else they can do except just actually cut government spending. And from the perspective of a mayor or a governor or a state legislature, that's, of course, a really bad thing. They never like to cut budgets. They don't want to cut total employment for state and local government and all that. So as I was watching these revenues, the new data start to roll in, and discussions about cutting state budgets by 10%, sometimes 20%, and these are just the preliminary numbers, I started to grow really doubtful that governors and mayors could really keep these lockdowns going. Like, I didn't think they would open the lockdowns for humanitarian reasons or because they understood the economy or anything like that. I just figured they would start to see their revenue disappear and would start to get kind of panicky about it. And I think that is one big reason now that you're starting to see these states more willing to, even if they're not calling it, in some of these purple and blue states, even if they're not saying, yeah, we're really freeing everything up now, they're saying, we're going to sort of ease things in now, we're going to take some baby steps. I think as a matter of practice, they're hoping they can really get at least most of the economy going just so they can get tax revenue coming in again.
Well, look, Ryan, I kind of agree with you, but on the other hand, if you look at what Brian Kemp did yesterday, and I've been saying for 2 weeks on the radio that the modeling is wrong, the whole thing's now a sham as far as I'm concerned. That doesn't say anything about the 50,000 souls that we've lost, all right? I mean, this is a horrible thing, and anybody that's at risk or suffering now from the virus. But the modeling is so false. I mean, first they said 2.5 million people died, then it was 2 million, then it was 200,000, then it was 100,000, now it's 60,000. First they said our hospitals would be overrun and we'd run out of ventilators. Then they said we had to flatten the curve. All this has been done, and now they still don't want the economy to open. And meantime, you go to Lowe's, they're packed. Amazon's hiring 350,000 people, but the guy that's selling the flowers and seed on the corner Main Street is going bankrupt. All right, the whole thing is sick as far as I'm concerned. But it took one red state governor, Brian Kemp in Georgia. What he did is he's like, I'm opening up everything except bars, nightclubs, dance clubs, and concert venues. That's it. Everything else is open. Beach is open. Hey, be smart, social distance. You feel like a mask, fine. You don't, fine. But we got to get everything open. So that's a little bit different than you got from some of the purple governors who are saying, let's ease into it, right?
Yeah, I think they're getting a lot of pressure from other states. In my own state of Colorado, all the surrounding states have less lockdown sorts of provisions than this state has. And so what you've got are a lot of states next door that are opening up business and have just more freedom in that regard. And I think that then puts pressure on the states that are right next door. But they're faced with pressure then from their own constituents in these purple and blue states who are working in the state and local governments. For example, when you look at the public school system and how they're now talking about merging schools, freezing hiring, laying off teachers. Well, they don't call them layoffs. They're going to be furloughs. And that's an extremely important interest group from their perspective. And they're going to start hearing about, well, what are you going to do to keep the schools open? And I'm very curious to see now, what have they got planned for come August? They're just going to keep schools closed? I mean, how are they going to justify paying them? I'm sure they would love to just keep paying them to do nothing. But when they're looking at big budget cuts, they're going to receive a lot of pressure from the teachers union and those groups to find the money to keep paying those people. And you're not going to be able to find that money if you keep the economy locked down.
Ryan McMaken with us. He is the senior editor at the Mises Institute. So, Ryan, let's go to your state in Colorado, where the other day your governor said, hey, simply put, stay home, save lives. What the hell does that mean?
Oh, it's just the the usual assumption that if you go out and you go to the grocery store, you're going to spread the virus everywhere. And I don't pretend to be some expert on this sort of thing. All I know is that people can generally look after their own safety, and they're grown-ups, and people can decide for themselves what sort of risk they wish to expose themselves to. And I also know, as you noted, that this is disproportionately hurting small businesses, that it's big corporate entities that are able to weather this storm much, much better. So it's a lopsided problem for these small people.
Of course it is. Of course it is, Ryan. And what group of people is the number one most fervent supporters of President Trump?
I actually have no idea. Tell me.
Small business owners. Small business owners who are being hurt. The small business owners in America, which has fueled this economic resurgence that we have, is the core of the Trump deplorable base. And they're his most fervent supporters that donate to his campaign and that spend money on him and that work for him. These are the small business owners. This is the core of his base. And so for the Democrats, hey, wipe them out, right? And in their view, it's like, look, they elected this guy, so this is better than the gulag. Just get rid of him. Wipe them out, just destroy their families, destroy their businesses, destroy the economy, make them bankrupt, give them a $1,200 check, bankrupt their families, just destroy their lives. Who cares, right? They're not voting for us. But then you look at the PPP and you look at the money that big businesses got out of this $350 billion, Ryan, it's shameful. It really is.
Oh, there's very little that's actually being done in terms of helping small business. If they wanted to really help small business, there'd be massive deregulation. They'd be reducing the minimum wage. They'd be doing whatever they could to make it easier to start and sustain a business. But as you know, I mean, it's not just Democrats who don't care about small business people. Most people don't. They only make up 10% of the voting base. They're only a very small percentage of the people in your community who actually make a full-time living from starting and owning a business. And most people actually have no idea about how you start a business, keep it going, how payroll is met, how people get employed, how wealth is built. Most people who are employed, they just think this money appears from somewhere, and if your employer isn't paying you a lot, it's because he's too greedy. And they just really don't have the slightest notion of how that all works. And so if the government just decides what wages are going to be or adds some new regulation onto a small business owner in order to make it better for quote-unquote workers, then they're fine with it. And they don't really see down the line that puts businesses out of business and actually ends up reducing employment. So it's a really quite a big problem with the fact that small business people are generally regarded as an expendable minority.
We're with Ryan McMaken. He is the senior editor at the Mises Institute. Ryan, talking about these governments not being able to fund themselves, but now you got Larry Hogan and others in Maryland. He's the governor of Maryland. He comes to mind because his state is going bankrupt, and now he's crying and demanding the federal government bail him out. Demanding it. I guess I live in Virginia, so I should bail out Maryland now, right? Is that the way it works now?
Yeah, the calls for the bailouts are probably just going to get more and more fierce. Illinois is asking for a bailout, and a huge one. I mean, they're going to be asking for bailouts that go beyond just the revenues that have been lost.
Sure. They're going to use taxpayer dollars and their Federal Reserve printing money in order to pay for all of the other debt that they have nothing to do with the virus, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And now I don't think they're going to be able to get what they want, though. I know that the Fed is perfectly happy to bail out Wall Street over and over again and make sure billionaires remain billionaires, make sure Jamie Dimon never has to take any sort of pay cut after running yet another bank into the ground. But local governments, I'm not sure they're going to be able to get what it is that they want from the Feds, because I just don't see the enthusiasm for it at the federal level. So they are going to end up doing some massive budget cuts. And even though we act like, good, I'm glad there's going to be massive layoffs, it does actually end up hurting the people who paid taxes all these years to their local governments. I mean, people pay taxes year in and year out for parks and for roads and all that sort of thing. And after all that, a lot of these voters are just going to end up with potholes everywhere. They're going to end up with ill-kept parks. They're not going to get the services that they paid for years because there was so much mismanagement at the state and local level with the tax revenues that they did have. And I don't think we can expect them to print enough money to just make everything fine again.
So you were not surprised, like me, that Wall Street banks were going to rate this payroll protection fund the way it's coming out now. That it sounds like you were not shocked by that.
No, I'm not shocked in the slightest. I'm surprised as much money got to the small businesses as it did. I just assumed they would be written in such a way that it would all end up benefiting these Wall Street firms, and it looks like it did. And yeah, they're going to do some small additional stuff for that, but the vast bulk of the money is to keep banks and the financial sector whole, and that's just going to mean less money will go into other parts of the economy. We have what's called a financialized economy, and it's an economy where the safe bet is always on the financial sector. It's always on Wall Street because that's what keeps getting bailed out. That's where the government is just going to print money to save you. Whereas if you invest money into actual production, into non-financial services, that sort of thing, well, you probably won't get bailed out for that. So why would you put as much money into that? So there's an inherent favoritism toward that one sector, and that ends up, of course, then being a disadvantage for places other than New York City and places that aren't Wall Street heavy.
The government just prints money and bails them out in perpetuity. And, of course, Goldman Sachs, as we've always said, basically runs the American economy. And you brought up Jamie Dimon. I mean, how many banks – this guy makes, I don't know, trillions of dollars or something. How many banks is this guy going to crash?
Well, these guys all should have, of course, their firms should have gone bankrupt. They should have lost their jobs back in 2009. Mm-hmm. And instead, we just decided, we got to keep all the banks liquid. We can't let any of these businesses go out of business, and we'll just kind of keep this scheme going over and over. So what it does is it basically turns the economy into a doomsday machine, where we've got all these fragile zombie firms where the only reason they're still in business is because they can continue to borrow at rock bottom interest rates. And if they had to actually rely on a real functioning revenue model, they would have gone out of business a long time ago. And so the only way to keep it going is to print more and more money for more and more stimulus, to have the Fed buy more and more assets. And then the big tragedy of it all is when it's done, we're going to have to hear about how capitalism and how free markets caused this problem, when the reality, of course, is that it was a central bank, bailouts, fiscal policy, all of that.
Unbelievable. When you look at it's about $4 trillion now that has been flooded into the private equity market in the form of Fed loans. And, of course, what private equity has done is they're trying to merge their balance sheets now with the Fed to get rid of all of their debt. Where does that money go?
Oh, well, heck, sometimes it goes to hedge funds. I mean, this isn't just anymore like propping up depository institutions like you and I might actually have our money in. There could maybe be some benefit to ordinary people. But we're talking about all sorts of small little Wall Street operations where there's huge amounts of money involved, a small number of employees. That's one of the problems with financialization, is it helps just a small number of people are actually employed in that field. And this money, it's not going out into the real economy in a lot of cases. It's just there to keep earnings and liquidity in place for these Wall Street firms. And it just really, there's no evidence that it translates into general assistance for ordinary people in the general economy. And it's real just narrow and focused and just helping out that one sector.
Unbelievable. I want to thank Ryan McMaken for being with us, the senior editor of the Mises Institute. Thanks for being with us, Ryan. Thanks for that perspective. Unbelievable.
Thank you.